Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the video. We're going to be talking more about the PlayStation 4K. Now, I know AIM has already put out a video today regarding the fact that it's, well, real. Sony have confirmed it. But let's face it, them confirming it at this point is pretty much by the by. We've known that it's been a thing, that too many developers have spoke about it, too many leaks have happened, too many rumours regarding the specifications. At this time, it was all but confirmed that we knew that Sony were working on something behind the scenes, and essentially them not going ahead and telling us that it's real but it won't be at E3 would have been very disappointing. It would have meant that the E3 conference would have somewhat flat on its face, and there would have been a lot of bad PR, at least in my mind. So in this video, I don't want to talk about that. I want to also minimise talk about specifications and instead give my 2 cents on this, because people are asking me. I've gotten tweets, I've gotten emails regarding it, I've gotten Facebook messages, both personal and on the Facebook page. So I just want to give my 2 cents. Now, I'll admit, this could probably change in the space of 2 seconds after Sony actually provide more information on this stuff. But, hey, we're going on what we know now. My concerns are very much like most of yours, I imagine. It's splitting up the Sony ecosystem. It's splitting up PlayStation 4 owners to the haves and the have-nots. Now, don't get me wrong, we all know that if you buy a Neo, your game will load just like mine will. So, essentially, if you put in a copy of, let's say, Uncharted 5, if it's going to be a thing, let's just for the sake of this video say that it is, if you put it in, you're going to be able to play Uncharted 5, assuming it's for the PS4, and I will be able to play Uncharted 5 on my vanilla system. But there are some differences. There are key graphical differences between the two consoles. Simply put, the PS4K is a lot more powerful, right? And we all know about that. But whatever the reasons, whatever the intentions Sony might have, it might be because they don't think that the standard PS4 is powerful enough for the PSVR. It might be that they just want to embrace the fact that 4K and that developers need that extra performance. It might be, and this might be somewhat more cynical, but it might be that they just want to have extra cash in or a way of selling more televisions, more 4K televisions. But for the end customer, for you and I, it means that once again there is a division. Yes, your console can play the same games as my console, but it brings us to a more PC-like ecosystem. If you can't afford or you simply do not want to adopt the more powerful hardware, then you are stuck with what is essentially an inferior product. Now, to some people, that won't bother them. If you're wealthy, it certainly won't bother you. You'll just jump on to the next PlayStation or the upgraded model. If you're less wealthy and you don't really care so much about the graphical fidelity of a game, that also might not bother you. But for many, it breaks the intrinsic value of a console. It breaks the very fabric of this system. The main value of a console is that you know that you are getting a platform which is going to be stable for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Admittedly, when it starts to get to the 8-year mark, that's way too long. But even so, you know that that platform is going to be able to run whatever you throw at it, and there's not going to be better versions of it coming on. Sure, there might be a slimline model. Sure, there might be a model with a larger hard drive. Sure, there might be a model which has, let's say, runs a little cooler or whatever. Which is fine, and we all understand that. It just is what it is. But you don't get better graphics. You don't get a smoother frame rate. You don't get things which would really change the nature of the hardware. And I think that's what a lot of folks are concerned with. They're concerned that Sony might be having a slight case of hubris. That with their decision to release the PlayStation Neo, it might simply fracture the ecosystem and it might piss people off. And I think some And certainly from the messages I've got, some folks are just concerned, some folks are pissed, and they actually just want the entire system to flop, and they're actually basically cursing the day that Sony created the PlayStation. And others are excited. They're excited with the prospect of being able to play at higher resolutions, at the higher frame rates. And I know I don't want to turn this into a technical video. Let's just be honest. The 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, whatever the hell the GPU ends up being clocked at, let's say 4.2 as a rough estimate. It's a lot more powerful than the vanilla PS4, but it's also still behind the curve of a PC. Now, it's interesting to me that Sony have decided to not reveal the PlayStation. Now, I wonder if they're starting to hear reports, rumours of the Scorpio, that they don't want to be behind the power curve. And now you've got this really freaking weird situation, potential weird situation, where Microsoft knew that Sony were doing their thing. Microsoft, for bollocks to this, not being behind again, I'm going to 60 flops, I am. Sony thought, no, you're not doing that. You're not having a console that's that much more powerful, and that yet only releasing, let's say, for sake of argument, 9 months later. Bollocks to that, good sir. We're going to release one that's 17,000 teraflops. Obviously, I'm just completely making things up at this point, but you get the idea. It's that escalation, and Sony might not have thought that. It might have just thought to themselves, hey, we're just not ready yet. Maybe we don't want to flood the market, especially if they're not going to release it in 2017, 2016. Maybe they're concerned that with the PSVR, so many games coming out during the Christmas season, people just could not afford the PS4K. And let's be honest here, while early adoption doesn't necessarily guarantee a console's success or a new piece of hardware success, excitement and people buying that hardware at the start, so they talk about it online, especially now, especially in the age of the internet, where videos are produced, where people go to websites like NeoGAF and Reddit and GameFAQs and GameSpot and whatever other bloody forums you happen to frequent, and talk about the hardware you've got and post images and say, hey, this is much faster than my old system, or this is much better, it's much better graphics, or, you know what, I'm really happy I bought this new system. And people do it all the time, and that's one of the things that motivates sales. So I do wonder if there was some of that going on as well. So now we're in this weird position where consoles are going to become a lot more like smartphones. But how long that's going to last, and how long realistically you're going to have the same console cycle, one would imagine that you would have a PS4, a PS4.5 in this case, and then potentially we'll move on to a PS5, right? Or another iteration of the PlayStation where the old games just won't work, because at some point or another, the old architecture, the old PlayStation is going to be so ancient, you're not going to really be able to play games on it. For example, let's say the PC. If you own a GTX 980 or a 1080 or a 390 or a Fury or something like that, you're good. You can play anything. If you've got maybe a slightly older graphics card, let's say a GTX 670 or a 680, you're still pretty good. You can play games at most modern games at 1080p, but you'll have to turn down the graphical settings, right? On the other hand, let's say that you're going back even further into the dawn of time. Let's say that you have something along the lines of a, let's say a 480 or a 470, a GTX 470. Okay, you're probably going to be able to play most games, but you're definitely going to have to turn the quality settings down an awful lot. And if you've got something even older, like the 8800 series, for example, good luck to you if you're trying to play a modern game with good graphical settings and really enjoy it. There is a point where you've got that cutoff where the game engines have evolved so much and developers are trying to do so much that you've got this balancing act. Do you continue to evolve the game engine? Do you continue to evolve your vision and, well, basically not have certain sections or certain ideas achievable to a decent degree on the older platform? Or do you simply continue to evolve it and just eventually say, well, those are have-nots, sorry, can't do it? Which I guess almost makes it another console generation in that respect. It's a bit weird. I think to a lot of individuals, and feel free to comment on your preference, like A, B or C, would you have preferred to have seen the PS4.5? Would you have preferred Sony to wait, let's say another 2 years, 1 year, let's say 2017. Let's say 2017, they decided, hey, we're releasing the PlayStation 5. So 1 year, so that would mean that the PS4 roughly would have been out for 4 years. So 2017, the PS5 comes out. It could be backwardly compatible. Let's say it is backwardly compatible, but the PS4 is unable to play PS5 games. Or, and I guess this is option C, would you have preferred for Sony to have waited, let's say another 1 to 2 years on top of that? So let's say for this argument it would be 2018, 2019, then they released the PlayStation 5, and then, once again, let's assume it's backwards compatible, because why the fuck not? But obviously, PS5 games will not work on the PS4. It's a very chicken and egg situation, and I guess the price point of consoles makes it really dicey. Realistically, despite the fact that Sony were boasting that the PS4 was a supercharged PC architecture and all of this bollocks, you can optimize, you can do the best you can, but realistically the system is what it is when it's released. Even if you say it's 30%, 40% more powerful equivalently than the same architecture because of these optimizations. A lot of that, by the way, was down to shitty DirectX 11, and to a lesser degree OpenGL. I say a lesser degree because OpenGL was not as prolific in its usage, but yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons that PC games had so many problems, and it's starting to become less of a big deal now. DirectX 12, you've got Vulkan, Mantle, although obviously Vulkan is pretty much replacing Vulkan is pretty much replacing Mantle, as is DirectX 12, but still, it's just this weird position where consoles have this stagnant price point, which you might be able to charge £300, or let's say $350 US, $400 US. When it starts to get to $450 or $500 though, you can't ask people to do that. And that's why console hardware gets so quickly outdated. A year afterwards, 2 years afterwards, you've still getting problems. Microsoft managed to alleviate this somewhat with the original Xbox. As I've said several times before in videos, the original Xbox was an absolute monster. The GPU in it was so powerful for the time, and there was a reason that Microsoft were taking a loss with every console sold. It cost them a lot of money to produce that hardware. There were some technical limitations with the original Xbox, not enough RAM, some memory bandwidth maybe, but overall it was an absolute beast when it was released. An absolute monster. And, yeah. Going on to a lot of forums, you can read the websites like NeoGAF, you can read them like, let's say, Reddit. You can read those, and then you can get people's rough idea of what they want to do. However, comments on a forum, which, let's face it, if you're a member of, let's say, NeoGAF, there's a good chance that you're probably more informed or slightly more hardcore than the average gamer. Now, I'm not saying that the average gamer won't buy the PS4K, but you're going to be more informed than them on average. I'm not saying that you have to be a member of those forums to be informed, but there's a high probability if you are a member that you are well informed. And a lot of those individuals have made the argument that if you start increasing the price point, and it's one that I subscribe to, it's an argument, a viewpoint I subscribe to, if you keep increasing the price of this hardware, people are then going to start flock to the PC, which works out really fucking well for Microsoft. And PC hardware now is getting cheap. The RX 480 is a friggin' monster for the price. It's 1080p, it's much more powerful than the PS4, much more powerful than the PS4K. And you know what? Next year, when the PS4K, assuming it is released next year, comes out, there's going to be a more powerful RX 480. Or equivalent from Nvidia, like the GTX 1060, I'm just using the 480 as an example. And honestly, DirectX 12 is also helping. Low APIs are starting to help. It means that older CPUs, which were kind of a bit old at this point. They weren't really that much of a beast anymore. They're also kind of youthful. You could go certain Xenon routes, which pretty cheap, very powerful, especially if you overclock them. A 2500, 2600K, pretty cheap, very powerful. Memory now, 8GB of DDR3 is pretty much free on eBay. Especially if you're going higher latency, which, let's face it, if you're building a cheap gaming rig, you're happy to cut a few corners. Now, I'm not saying that PC is better than PlayStation's here. I'm not. I don't believe one platform is better than the other. I'm just saying that if you're going to keep chasing the performance itch, and every couple of years you're going to plonk down $300, $400, $500 on a new system, there are going to be many individuals who are motivated more to just being able to do that in their own time and just going the PC route. Then again, perhaps I mentioned this price and the barrier to entry, but perhaps Sony are going to have more of a smartphone model, more of a contract model, which is something Amy and I discussed in the last podcast, if memory serves. We're going to have more of a model of, hey, you've got your original PlayStation 4, you can trade it in, and you can get this one, and then the old PlayStation 4 gets sold as a refurb, really cheap, and everyone's a winner, right? Well, that's another way to look at it. But who knows? I mean, it's a very weird thing. It's a very weird cusp that we're in. And I guess iterative hardware is realistically the only way forward. Not only does VR take a freaking ridiculous amount of performance, but modern day game engines, modern day developers are able to push games so fast. Look how amazing Infamous Second Son looked. Look how amazing the Order 1886 looked. And there's a reason that they went with black bars with the Order 1886 and 30 FPS, and no, it was not because they were chasing fucking cinematic experiences. I guarantee you, if the PS4 had been 3 times, 4 times more powerful, if they were putting that on the PC, it would have not looked like that. It just wouldn't have. They would have opted to have higher resolution. They would have opted to have X, Y, or Z, just because that's how, they would have liked it, I imagine. Of course, I'm probably talking for the developers. Maybe they wouldn't have, but I would be shocked if they didn't. I guess what I'm trying to tell you all is this. It's either iterative hardware, or we get used to games not really moving on as fast as what we expect, or we all start moving towards PC, or streaming, or something. Microsoft, as I've said previously, they're actually kind of the best off out of Sony and Microsoft. And I'm not including Nintendo. The reason I'm not mentioning Nintendo is because we don't know what Nintendo are planning. So there's no point in me counting Nintendo when we don't really know what Nintendo's future plans are. There's so little information regarding even the performance of the NX, because one rumor says it's more powerful than the Scorpio, other rumours are saying it's not as powerful as the original Wii. Okay, I might be slightly exaggerating, but you get the idea. Sony and Microsoft, with Microsoft, they don't care. They're locking you into the Windows ecosystem. They're good. They don't care if the PC succeeds. They don't care if the Xbox succeeds. All they care about is something that they are selling succeeds, which is one of the reasons, obviously, their nightmare scenario is Vulkan starts taking off, Linux starts taking off, but it's not done that yet. Despite Valve with a lot of promises with SteamOS, which is another video I could make entirely, it just hasn't gone that mile, and it's a real shame. I want it to. I want Valve to be a real competitor to Microsoft on the desktop space, on the laptop space, because I think it would be good for the industry. It's one of the reasons that I was actually quite happy that Sony rabbit punched Microsoft and Microsoft rabbit punched Sony, respectively. It's good for the industry. It means, hey, no, you can't just have this whole market to yourself. Customers, which is you, which is I, which is individuals who are giving them money, we tell them what we want. So be vocal about it. Don't be rude. Be blunt. Be happy to vote with your wallet. Don't just pre-order something on a promise. And if anything's told you this, it would be the DVR situation from Microsoft, where they've cancelled it, where you can no longer in the future record live TV because they've cancelled the project because they said, we don't think gamers or our customers want that, which, to be honest, I would agree, but still, it sucks for the individuals who plunk down money to buy the Xbox. I guess this video is getting a bit rambly. It's about 20 minutes, and I've talked a lot about my thoughts, a lot of my opinions. Ultimately, I don't know what to think. I love some of the prospects of it. I love some of the ideas behind it. And perhaps Sony's intentions are noble. Perhaps they've got a good upgrade scheme in mind. And perhaps, really, they don't have much of a choice, because we as customers constantly want better games, better graphics. We want virtual reality. We're complaining all the time on forums about, fuck, another visual downgrade. Look at when Watch Dogs, the new trailer was released for Watch Dogs 2, and everyone immediately said, it's not going to look like this on launch. It's not. It's going to look garbage. It's going to be visual downgrades. I can't wait to see what the lighting looks like, and this looks like, and that looks like. Well, maybe that this Watch Dogs is targeting the Neo. Maybe that's what it will look like on the PS4K, but it's certainly going to piss off individuals who only have the original PlayStation. There is no clear, decisive winner here. There is no right decision. There is only your wallet, your credit card, your decision to buy the hardware and support what you want. So, that's what I'd suggest to you, my friends. Don't rush out and pre-order hardware if it's something you're a bit dicey about. If you're unsure whether Sony are going to live up to the promises, don't do it. Wait a couple of weeks. Wait for the hardware to be released. Wait to see what their decisions are, how this affects you as a gamer, and then support them. And by the way, when I say Sony here, I also mean Microsoft with the Scorpio. We also want to see how the Scorpio behaves. Maybe it's not even backwardly compatible. It probably would be commercial suicide for it not to be, but maybe it's not forward compatible. So the original Xbox hardware won't play the Scorpio games. Maybe there are certain games that will play, certain games that won't play. We just don't know. It's a really weird situation in the console market, and honestly, I think this is one of those times where, despite the fact that I'm so informed with so much stuff that I've read, I don't think I've been so, what's coming next since the 90s, since we had the Genesis and the 32X and the Sega CD and the Saturn was coming out and the PlayStation was on the horizon, and we saw news constantly about the N64 or the Ultra 64 as it was known then, and how Nintendo kept telling us, no, CDs are not the future, it's all cartridges. Cartridges have much faster loading times, and it was crazy. And how graphics cards started to come out in the later 90s, like the 3DFXs and the Voodoo, original Voodoo came out, and then the Voodoo 2, and then how Glide, and the industry was like a turmoil. And I start to think to myself, it's very much like that now. We're almost in the Wild West. Anyway, I don't know if necessarily I've changed your mind. I don't know if I've informed you. But it's good to talk. Let me know what you think of this. Message us on Facebook. Message us on Twitter. There's links to our Twitters and our Facebooks and all of that stuff in the visual description. That would be interesting. In the video description. Give us a tweet. Let us know what you think of this one. I'm genuinely curious, and I think it's down to Sony, down to Microsoft to convince us that they have good intentions. And I firmly believe that they don't have much of a choice at this point. I firmly believe that iterative hardware or faster releases of hardware realistically is the only option they've got, because we as customers want that better graphics, but it's if they can do it right. And just because we want something, it doesn't mean that these companies will do it right. So it's down to them to convince us and show us that they have some cool ideas. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. It got a lot preachier, a lot ramblier than I had originally thought it would. But hey, hopefully you've enjoyed it. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.